Okay, we have a lot of ground to cover today, so I'm gonna jump right in. Feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions or if there's anything that you want to discuss in particular, especially related to the topic that we're covering today. Okay, so we have been talking about your ability to generate a profit and be profitable, especially as it pertains to funding and from a funding perspective. Okay. We're going to go through part 2 today. Part 1, we're talking about value, creating value, what is value, how is value determined. Those are some of the things that we covered yesterday. The session that we did is available on YouTube. So if you want to catch that replay, that is available there. I also emailed it out to the people that are on my email list. So if you were on that email list, you should have already gotten it this morning. Also promoting the second session for today. Okay. What else? So today we're going to be talking about generating profit and the potential profit via value from a strategic standpoint. So we're going to go through 11 points that I want to cover for creating and delivering value strategically. And then we're going to talk about how to identify areas where adding value will have the biggest impact. I just have my notes here. And then we're also going to talk about addressing direct cost of creating value. And when we get to that point, we're going to reference the Win With Us and Watch Us Win workbook. And we're going to reference that book because within the book, we have something called a priority matrix. That priority matrix breaks down how to create value and how to break down the cost and determine the cost of creating that value. But we're going to break it down even further. Okay. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about this from a funding perspective. Like, what are the implications of all of this stuff related to funding? All right. So before we get started, I'm going to remind you at the end, but before we get started, one of the things that we need to consider is that well-funded and consistently funded businesses are developed. They are well developed. Okay. So why we're talking about this is because this is a part of having a well-developed business. When you have a well-developed business, then you can position yourself to get funded and funded consistently, especially at higher levels of funding. Okay. So with that being said, we're going to be talking about all of the ways that we need to integrate these pieces to create a well-funded business or a well-positioned business, well-developed business, so that we can then consistently and reliably get funded. Okay. So, let me know if you're ready to get started. Because if you are, then I'm ready, because we have a lot of ground to cover today. We're going to be here for a while. Ready. Let me get a something, sign of life from anybody, somebody. Don't just watch me. Talk to me, people. What's going on? Are we ready to get started? Because we have a lot of ground to cover. I would suggest pen and paper. If you want, you also can catch the live later. I'm going to make sure that I post this on YouTube. So while you're there, like, subscribe, do all the things, But this will be available on YouTube later on today. All right. So let's go ahead and start. Creating and delivering value strategically. Ways to produce value. We're going to go through 11 individual ways to produce value. Number 1 is providing educational content. So this is going to be important, especially now, because a lot of consumers like to be educated. They want to be able to use a product or service the most efficiently. They don't want to be going through anything blind. And they want to be able to derive the most value from whatever it is that you're delivering. And the way to do that is to make sure they understand the best way to use it, and or what the intent or benefit was, or the multiple ways that it can be used. Okay. One example of a company that really does this well is Scrub Daddy. Like they do it via their marketing and their messaging, but they do show you all the different applications, and they're low-key educating you on how to use their products in a way that will get the most efficiency from the use of whatever product it is that they have. All right. So that's one company that does that really well. And then what I've also noticed with a lot of companies lately is that when you look on Amazon for a product, a really well listed product anyway, you will notice that a lot of them have videos on how to actually use the product, right? I think that that is a function of being able to instill confidence in purchasing the product, especially if it's something that you might be doing like a DIY, or you're not really familiar on how to use it. For example, like let's say you were doing your nails by yourself for the first time and you were going to purchase like gel or something. I'm saying this out of experience. You being able to have a video that shows you the proper use of the actual product itself instills more confidence before the purchase and helps you secure that purchase, right? So one way that you can create value strategically for your customer is to be able to just provide educational content. That's way number one. All right. Way number two is to streamline customer experience. All right. This one seems pretty obvious, but I still see this as a mistake that people make fairly often. Your process should be as seamless as possible. All right. If there are too many steps, if your page is taking too long to load, if there's too much text on the picture, on the ad creative, if you are, if there's like 10 things they need to do when it really could be reduced to 3, it's going to turn your customer away. We have unfortunately fried our attention spans and our abilities to process a lot of information, unfortunately. So the more succinct and easy it is to get through whatever it is that you are offering, the more likely it is that you will be able to not only get a customer, but retain a customer. All right. So think one click, right? Amazon is really good about this. I'm trying to think of who else. Amazon's really good about this. Yeah, Amazon's probably the best example that I could think of off the top of my head. All right. Another thing that you can do to produce value is to customize your services and or personalize your offerings. Now, this does not work for everybody. This does not work across all industries because personalization is very costly. Okay, and I understand that. And then there's just some things you just can't personalize because that's just not how it was meant to be used. And I get that. But if you can add value via personalization, then that is a great way because you know the customer is getting exactly what they want and they're willing to pay a little bit more because it's made to their specifications, right? One company that I can think of that does that has done that really well, and a lot of other companies have followed that model, is Subway, right? If you're old enough to remember when Subway had first come out, that was pretty much their claim to fame. You get to have your sandwich or your salad or whatever they sold at the time done to your liking. You don't have to pick off of a menu and then not be able to get like any kind of accommodation for whatever your meal is. No, you walk down a conveyor belt for all intents and purposes, right? And then you go and you pick what you want your sandwich to look like. And they help you facilitate that. There's someone behind the counter that's helping you facilitate how you want your sandwich made. So being able to do that was a value add for Subway. And that was one of the things that helped them stand out from other sandwich shops at that time. Now a lot of other places actually implement this, right? So that's to show how valuable it is that even other competitors and people who are operating in the same space took that same model because people like things that are done for them, how they want it. So if that's something that you can do within your business, then absolutely think about ways that you can customize the service or customize or personalize it so that it is made for that customer, right? Another thing that you can do is invest in after sales support. So this is going to be more popular in the coming years for sure. And I truly believe that because a lot of people, despite the fact that they may make a purchase, the purchase may be emotional. And then once they actually go through the process, this is just an experience. Actually, when they go through the process, they'll realize that there's more of a technical or logical, there are more technical or logical steps to things. So after the initial emotional impulse to purchase that thing has subsided and they actually start using it, that's when they will need that support. All right. And imagine, like, if you think about a company that you go to or that you use and you cannot reach customer service, isn't that like super annoying? Right. So even having good customer service in and of itself is a value add. So think about ways that you can offer or instill after sales support so that the customer knows, okay, once I make this purchase, I'm not necessarily on my own. I know that I have some way to get additional support if I need it. That will add value to them. All right. Especially if it's something that's a little bit more complex or nuanced or new or novel to the customer. All right. So another thing that you can do to add value is to add unexpected bonuses. All right. This is going to be something that you can do without really, you can do this as part of your offering and they never have to know about it and it could already be included in the price, right? So for example, let's say that you give 3 bonuses, but the price of something is $100. You've already marked it up or whatever your service or product is to include the price of the bonuses. The customer just doesn't know that it's a part of whatever you're offering. That is a great way to add value because perceivably the customer is getting more than what they thought they were paying for, right? But you know that it was part of your business model from day one. So it becomes a pleasant surprise for the customer themselves, okay? So I've gone through providing educational content, streamlining customer experience, customizing your services or personalizing offerings, investing in after sales support, and adding unexpected bonuses. So we've already gone through 5. 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Does anyone have any questions so far? And at the end, you will be given the opportunity to talk or to come on live to ask any questions specifically about your business that may give you some insight into how to add value for your customer. Any questions so far? Okay. I'm going to take that as a no. All right. So another strategic approach that you can implement and that is actually gaining a lot of popularity is gamification. Okay. Gamification is the art of being able to add like reward systems within your product or service or deliverable so that it becomes more engaging and rewarding for the client to use it. Okay. One of the places that we're seeing that a lot is education, and it makes it more fun because the person feels like they're working and striving towards something and they get to win a prize at the end of it, whatever that prize may be. Okay. So the gamification of things is a way to add value because if there is something that the client might not necessarily want to do, like be educated, or they don't want to feel like they're being educated or inundated with information, the reward for being able to be educated via a game will add value to them. Okay. And then if they know they're getting a prize for in exchange for the time that they spend for the learning, that can actually add value to the customer as well. So now I mentioned that it's going to be a really big element of the educational space. That is something, if you pay attention or if you do your own research, you'll see that there are a lot of platforms being built. There are a lot of integrations being made into the educational, even our educational system that rewards learning. All right. And then we're also seeing rewards for things like weight loss. We're seeing rewards for things like eliminating preventative diseases. We're seeing different ways to gamify interactions with healthcare professionals. We're seeing ways that people are integrating reward systems into different industries. So it not only gets the customer in the door, but it also helps you retain them as well because they know that there's something in it in addition to the benefit that you're giving them, right? So I hope that makes sense. Now, another way that you can continue to offer value is to offer clear and immediate results. Now, this is another one that's not necessarily for everyone because not everyone can make an immediate offer, right? But some things you can make an immediate offer for, right? So let's say, for example, when you go to the grant list in our bio and you make that, if there is a fee attached to it, there's not right now, but if there is a fee attached to it, you can go straight to the link, you put in your information, you download it, and then from there, you immediately get it into your inbox. right? There's an immediate exchange. The offer is clear. You ask for a grant list, you're going to get a grant list. It's going to go to your inbox, and the result is immediate. That's a very clear exchange between what you asked for and what was offered to you, and it's given to you immediately. Now, so that's one way that you can. If you cannot do that, then it might be in your best interest to think of ways that you can integrate value that is immediate. So even if it's like a phone call, a message that tells them, I received your message, or your deliverable is on the way. And a lot of companies do this. Like, you think those are small, nuanced things that are just kind of a part of our ecosystem now, but even offering communication immediately regarding the exchange could be valuable. Okay. Now, does anyone have any questions so far? Any questions so far? How do you communicate your value when you don't have an immediate offer? So we're actually going to talk about that a little bit more in the next part. So just stick around for a little bit. We're almost done with the creating and delivering value. Okay. So if you don't have an immediate offer, you don't necessarily need to try to force it. If you can, that'd be great. But we'll talk about communicating it a little bit later. All right. So the next thing that you can do is bundle complementary features. Okay. Not benefits, but features. So let's say that, let me see who does this well. Amazon. Why not, right? Let's say Amazon, let's say you go, we're going to stick with the nail glue example. Let's say you go to Amazon and you go to purchase DIY nail kit products. They will show you related products that you can bundle in addition to whatever it is that you're purchasing, so that it can help you achieve what it is that you're trying to achieve with your nails, right? So this is just an example. Now, as insignificant as that might seem, because we're so used to going through those processes, that is something that they're using that as a value add, right? You may not have remembered, oh yeah, I got to get a blue light, or whatever they call the curing light, so I can cure the gel on my nails, right? But because they're offering it to you and it's now in your face and it's in your line of sight, you know that this is something that you can add to your purchase. And for our purposes, really, this should be something that you can add at even a discount if you can, right? Because then that means that the person is getting something more that they may need to be able to produce the benefit that they need without having to technically purchase two things. They're getting two things for the price that a little bit less than what they would have had they been making the purchase individually, right? So if you can bundle them, that will be a great value add as well. All right. Let's see. Bundle complementary features. Okay. Guarantee satisfaction or outcomes. That's another thing that you can definitely do if you want to try to add value. This is another one that does not necessarily work for everyone. Like, for example, being in this grant space, I can't guarantee that you're going to win. I can tell you that the resources I provide you have been very helpful in positioning people to win, right? And that's just the honest truth. I can guarantee that you'll be satisfied with what you're learning. You're going to learn more. You're going to be empowered. You're going to have resources that will make you stand out from other people in the space. But I can't guarantee you're going to win. That's up to you and the funders and all the different variables and factors that we try to eliminate to increase your chances of winning. But there's so many different things that don't necessarily work for us to control, right? But if there is a factor that you can control, then if you can guarantee that outcome, absolutely talk about that from a value standpoint, okay? People like things that are guaranteed, right? That it just eliminates the risk in their mind of making that exchange in value like money, right? So the value is the money that they're losing, and the value that they want to gain in exchange for that is whatever you're guaranteeing. So if there's a way that you can guarantee satisfaction or an outcome, like for example, Amazon actually does this really well too. They say that they're going to guarantee they're going to deliver your product within 2 days. And they've also made a contingency saying that if we don't deliver that in 2 days, for example, you get, if you like do the expedited one and it's like the extra $2.99, they'll give you your money back, right? Like something like that. Or they'll give you whatever they'll give you in exchange for it. So in throughout their sales process, they are continuously making sure that your outcomes are met, but then they're also covering their behind saying, all right, well, if we don't meet our promise, because we made you a guarantee that you'll be satisfied. So if we don't meet our promise, here's what we're going to do to rectify that, right? But the guarantee's still there and it works. And then on top of that, they also guarantee that you'll be able to return most things without any penalties, right? Or additional penalties. So those are guarantees that work for Amazon. And if you look at that as an example, that gives your customer a little bit more confidence in you and the value that you can bring for them, right? Making your service accessible. So one of the ways that you can add value is to have different price points, right? That's one way, but then also making sure that there are different ways that people can actually pay for your product. One of the ways in the most recent years that has really given us the opportunity to make things more accessible is the buy now, pay later business model with like Affirm and Klarna and whatever the other one's name is. I forget their name all the time. Affirm, Klarna, and somebody remind me. There's one more. What's that other one? It's something. Now it's gonna be bothering me. Afterpay. There we go. Yeah, it's Afterpay. Okay, so those services have made things more accessible, right? If you were not able, like you can get Afterpay on Airbnb. Okay, so let's say you were not able to pay for an entire Airbnb stay up front. Now you can spread that payment over time. Like that's good for people who need that feature. It makes it more accessible for people who need to be able to go somewhere and then they need to extend it past the time of the trip, right? I think even I don't really shop on TikTok Shop too much, but I feel like I've seen that feature on there. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like one of them are on there. Like you can do Affirm or Afterpay or something like that on TikTok Shop, and which is great because it makes it accessible to people who want to make multiple purchases on TikTok Shop, right? So accessibility is really important in all ways, shapes, and forms. If you have a product that, and I think about this from a housing perspective, right? We need to make sure that houses are accessible or buildings are accessible. If there's someone with a disability, they need to be able to come into the building too, right? Like if you don't, you're alienating, an entire group of people who need to be able to access your product or your service. So think about accessibility from how do I make it as easy as possible for my customer to interact with me, to get with me, to get my product, to get my service, because that is a value add. If it's difficult, they don't want it, right? And then on top of that, your competitor can make it easy for them, and then you lost another segment of the market too, right? So, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. All right. And then the last but not least way that you can create and deliver value strategically is to regularly update and improve. All right. Apple, we talked about Apple a little bit yesterday, but Apple's really, really, really good about that. iPhone 1 looks nothing like the iPhone 13. Okay. The features, the improvements that they've made, the way that they force apps to, like all applications on these on the phone, they force your hand to evolve with all the versions of the iPhone, okay, with what the customer's hunger is for new, improved, and more efficient applications or features or whatever the case may be, right? We say it's annoying. They're like, oh, we're just paying for an upgraded version of the last phone. But if you really look at them through the generations, they have small, minute features, but they're using data to determine that these are features that people are actually going to want and use. They don't just make them like haphazardly, right? They're using information, data, insights, predictive analysis, business intelligence to determine why this a phone and this version or improvement or update needs to exist and how it's going to satisfy the needs of the customer, even if they don't know that they need those features yet, right? Or those benefits yet, which is a whole nother thing we can talk about another time. But regularly updating and improving and talking about what the new updated benefits are, what the new improvements are ways to add value to your customer, because they may not necessarily be ready to graduate from where they are, or they may be comfortable where they are, and then you improving and updating will help them to continue to stay with you, retention, right? And then also continue to derive additional benefits from being in your presence, which is what value is, the ability to derive the benefit, right? All right, so we're about to move on to how to identify areas where adding value will have the biggest impact. But before we do that, does anyone have any questions? And I didn't forget your question about communicating value. Any questions? Okay. So, how to identify areas where adding value will have the biggest impact. Number one, the profit is in the pain. Okay. What people experience and what they do not want to experience, as far as their pain points are concerned, is where the value is, where there's the most profit potential. Okay. If you can identify and easily and consistently identify either what the pain point is or what the pain points are going to be, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, your potential for profit is infinite, quite frankly. People move away from pain. They do not want to experience it, right? Pain medication, pain med addiction, okay? All of these things are a function of people moving away from pain. Rightfully so, right? Who wants to feel pain, right? We don't want to feel it. No matter what form it takes. It could be emotional, it could be mental, it could be environmental, whatever the case may be. We don't want to experience unfavorable anything, quite frankly. So that being said, the profit is in you being able to eliminate that pain for the consumer. And remember, back to point number 2, if you can eliminate the pain and make it as streamlined as possible, that's even better, right? If you can eliminate the pain and also customize it to that person's particular pain, you have a great product. If you can eliminate the pain and also offer additional support for additional pain points that may come up in the future later, people will keep paying you for those solutions, right? People are going to continue pouring money into your business because you're not just thinking about now, you're also thinking about later, okay? If you're eliminating the pain and then you're also making it rewarding for them while they're eliminating the pain via gamification, that's a product people will want to use, okay? If you're eliminating the pain and it's immediate, like a pain medicine, right? Well, relatively immediate, 30 minutes to an hour, right? And it lasts a really long time. For example, the extended release can be like 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours, whatever. That is something that someone will want to use and continue to use and will remain loyal to you for. So just think about these things. Think about it that way, right? And then the second thing that you can do to identify areas where adding value will have the biggest impact is to listen to people complain, okay? I say this all the time and people look at me like I'm crazy when I say it, but I love to hear people complain because it's really, that's where the opportunities are and that's where the opportunities lie. What are people complaining about? Because if you hear what they're emoting and saying and expressing, they're telling you what their problems are. They're telling you where their frustrations are and where they need help and where they're unable to solve it for themselves. Where they're not clear. They're telling you where they are experiencing pain. They're telling you where they're stuck, where they're limited, what they don't understand. They are communicating lack to you in some way. So that lack, if you have obviously if you're the most appropriate person and if you have the resources, you are the person that can give them the ability to move from that position to where they want to be and remove whatever it is that they're complaining about. And then now that presents your opportunity for profit. Okay? Is that clear? Okay. So another thing to consider when you're identifying value is tracking. Okay? When you're, for example, let's say you're in the process of streamlining your client's experience and you know there are multiple steps that they need to take. If they're getting stuck at one point, that is something that you need to be able to know and identify so that you can add a value there where they can move from that point to the end result that you want for them or with them. All right. That one is pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to go too much into it, but definitely track all of your processes, right? If you're seeing that the sales, if you're looking at your website, and actually had this problem with a client once. She was going through, people were going on her website. She was tracking it. She was tracking all of the different buttons that people were clicking, where they were getting stuck. And after the pop-up came up for people to put in their email is when they would leave the site. Why is that? Because it became very difficult for them to click off of the pop-up, right? That is somewhere where people are getting stuck. If they can't get through that roadblock, how are they going to continue to go through your website, see what you're about, learn about you, and make a purchase, or continue to learn about your process? They need to know, and they need to be able to do that by eliminating that barrier. So once we're able to eliminate that barrier, she saw higher conversions. Simple fix was costing her so much money. So I don't want you to negate the need for tracking, because you need to know where people are, where they're staying the most, right? For example, you could even use this in the inverse. If you find that you're tracking your process and people are spending a lot of time on a particular product, you can add a bundle there, right? You can add a little educational video to motivate them to sell there. You can add a discount code or coupon code right there if you see that a lot of people are spending time in that one particular area. So since they're there and people want to be there, get them while they're there. Put additional value in their face while they're in that space, right? So it might not necessarily be a thing of getting stuck. It might be where they're spending their most time, but track all of that, okay, to the point. All right. Next is going to be becoming a spy. You should know what your competitors are doing, because if there are things that they're not doing as far as satisfying the customer or being able to offer value, and you can integrate those things, that can add value to you versus you having to try to compete with them on price. Now, this is super important. You should never, ever compete on price. And this is a hill I will die on forever. I will erect my house and my cemetery on this hill, okay? I'm dying on it. Never compete on price. Because if you do not, especially as small business owners, if you do not have the resources to compete on price, you're always going to be priced out, okay? And customers, do not underestimate how price sensitive customers really are, okay? Some customers will go to a gas station that's 10 cents cheaper across the street, okay? Some customers will buy something that is 2 cents less, all right? Like, do not underestimate price sensitivity, okay? Even if unless you offer more value and it makes more sense to go to you because the price is justified. So what can you integrate that your competitor is not doing that can offer more value and still compete on price? Okay? Something to think about. Any questions about that? Okay. If your customers consistently have recurring questions or issues, those are also opportunities for profit, yes, but also where you can add value. Frequently asked questions, those pages exist mainly for that reason, because then they don't have to call, right? They can get their questions answered right on the website. If there's something that someone is frequently asking for, we use Cassie Ho as an example yesterday with how she addresses questions or issues that come up with her product development. She addresses it immediately. And if there's enough demand, it's justified. And if you want more insight into how she kind of implements that strategically, you can go back to the first part of this and watch how she does that, okay? Or what we talked about. Next is going to be data. So on November 21st, what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days from now, we're having a session on at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that is going to be talking about how to prepare for 2025 from a funding perspective, okay? Predictions about industries and what industries there are going to be opportunities in financially. Data is one of those, okay? Data is really important. It is one of those points where we can no longer ignore it. You need to know what your customer is doing at all times. You need to understand what is motivating them to purchase, what is motivating them not to purchase, what is getting them in the door, what is keeping them in the door. All of those are data points that are going to help you. And this is important as far as adding value, because when you have that information, you know where you can add value. To the next point, you can also anticipate their needs, right? What is the next natural step in the process that they're going to need based on the data that you're collecting, okay? Because if you're seeing that, if the data suggests that they're getting through a program in 30 days, you know that by day 27, you should be creating another offer for them to graduate with you based on what they might need in the future, right? So this is all things that you need to be looking at and tracking so that you know where you can insert your value, and only data can give that to you. Checking your analytics, looking at what works, looking at what doesn't work. And then when you find that those pockets of information, making sure that you're pivoting and adding the value there so you can get your customers in the door or keep them in the door, okay? And then last but not least, we need to test and refine. Pretty much self-explanatory, right? Make sure that you understand any assumptions that you have, especially when you're analyzing data. Any assumptions that you have, one, you should be researching it, right? Are you right? Are you wrong? You don't want to be optimistic about whether you're right or not, because you may be wrong. And then if you are wrong, that's okay. It's just information. It's not personal. Don't internalize it. That's all right. Use that data to pivot and make the necessary refinements that you need to make, because that's what this is. If you're testing it and you're looking at your information, you're seeing, okay, I thought this was going to work. It's not working. Let me move on to something else. That will be helpful for you to be able to find ways to integrate value. Excuse me, I'm drawing a blank. Okay, so any questions about that before we move to assessing the direct cost of creating value? Okay, so one of the ways that you can address or assess the direct cost of creating value is to calculate the direct cost of value creation. So one question you can ask yourself is, what will I need to create additional value? Does that mean time? Does that mean materials? Are there additional staff that you might need to hire? For example, let's say like you want to offer a personalized consultation. You will need to know what the hourly cost is for an additional staff person to be able to come on to offer that personalization, right? Is it a tool that you might need in order to create additional value? So that could be a CRM, that could be some kind of tech tool. Maybe you want to offer, maybe you want to get an additional feature on a software that you already use and you need to upgrade to a different membership to do that. You need to account for the direct cost of being able to implement that, right? Or whatever it is. So one thing to look at, okay, what am I going to add? What is it going to cost me to add this, if anything? Okay. And time is something that can be calculated. For example, one of the ways that I determine how much I'm going to charge for a training is I estimate the number of people that could possibly join, right? Because I know my conversion rates. And then I also put that against what my hourly rate is. I'm not charging everyone my hourly rate, but I'm assessing, all right, if it takes me 3 hours, example, to do a presentation, I'm going to look at the 3 hours of my time, what that cost. And then I'm also going to put that against how many people I think I can convert into that training, right? The same thing for anytime I have to travel or speak, okay? If I'm going to go create value somewhere and I'm going to speak, I try to add additional value to what I'm doing. So if I'm speaking somewhere, I'm going to bring books. How much is it going to cost me to produce these books, right? If I have to stay an additional day and I need childcare, what does that cost, right? I'm looking at all these different factors, and that's going to determine my price, okay? So you need to be able to look at all of the direct costs and really sit and think through it before you go and add that value. And then another thing is to factor the opportunity cost. If you are not able, what do you have to essentially sacrifice in order to be able to produce this value? Because what you do eliminates your ability to do something else. Okay. So that's another factor that you need to look into as well. Now, you also have to determine the perceived value. And you can ask. Simple as that. Okay. When I first started the training that I teach now on grant funding, I asked people, hey, if you were to get this, that, and that information, or if I were to offer this as a service, how much do, how much do you think it would be worth? What would you pay for it? Okay. Now this question is a little bit tricky. Okay. It's a little tricky. I'm going to tell you that now because people sometimes pay with their pocket when they don't understand value. Okay. They will tell you an answer. So you got to be discerning because they will tell you an answer based on what they can afford and not necessarily the value that they want from it. Because if they can get everything but the kitchen sink and you're willing to accept $2 for it, they're going to be more than happy because they're getting what they want and you're selling yourself short. So you're going to be mad. Okay. However, you also need to put that against, you also need to kind of consider what the actual value is. Okay. So just remember that there's two factors. So if someone's telling you like, okay, I will give you 2 months of support. I'm going to give you all of the trainings, all of the materials, everything for like $10. Or they'll tell you that they'll pay you for that. They're paying with their pocket, obviously. Right, guys? So just use your discernment. But asking is the easiest way. And one of the ways that you can assess whether someone understands the value or not is you asking them what it's eliminating for them, right? So if someone tells you, oh my gosh, this is going to help me streamline my grant process, it's going to help me clarify my vision, it's going to help me express my value, it's going to help me do this, it's going to help me do that. Like it'll eliminate all these pain points, but then they say they're paying $10 or they're willing to pay $10 or the value to them is $10. There's a disconnect there, right? So just think of it from that point of view, okay? Also, if you see that there is a higher value for the consumer, then you know that it justifies a higher price. All right. And luxury brands are really, really good at doing this, okay? Because value is also perceived, right? You have like an Hermes bag, for example. It's mostly handcrafted, right? They're using really superior materials. They have like a really big business model around exclusivity, and like you have to be on a list and you have to put your card on file and they can charge you whenever they want. And it's like you have to know somebody that knows somebody and sell your right kidney, and like it's like this whole thing, right, to get an Hermes bag. And because of all the hoops that you have to jump through, the value is perceivably higher, right? Because you know you're not going to walk, everyone's not walking around with an Hermes bag, right? So that justifies the price because of all the things that you have to do and they have to do in order to make that connection and for you to get the deliverable. So higher value, almost perceived value anyway, almost equally is justifies a higher price. All right. So we went through 3 things so far as far as assessing direct cost of creating value. Any questions about the things that I just mentioned? Okay. So another thing to do is compare your price to your competitors. But again, we're not competing on price. But you want to compare the price and you want to compare the value. All right. I'm not saying to base your price on your competitors. We kind of talked about this before. You can watch this again on YouTube later to kind of understand why I talked about that. However, if you're expressing your value, you can, 1, gain loyalty, but 2, look at what different people are doing and kind of put yourself in a place where you can charge more despite whatever it is that your competitors are doing. Okay. 2 companies that I watch very closely because I just think is so fascinating is Gain and Tide. Okay. Tide cost a lot more than Gain. Gain value proposition is that they cater to people with sensitive skin, and you still can use a scented product, right? Good value. It doesn't appeal to me because I don't have sensitive skin and I don't care for all these fragrance and scents, right? Okay, cool. Tide now really is banking for the most part. I'm not saying it's not a superior product, but they're mostly banking on the fact that they have seniority. Like they just have a bigger name. Everybody who knows something about a something detergent understands what Tide is, right? They know Tide has positioned themselves in the consumer's mind as a superior product. How they've done it is masterful. Honestly, they should do a whole masterclass on positioning, but that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. But the reason why I'm saying that is because even though it is a similar product that falls in the same category as far as detergent would be concerned, Tide can continue to price themselves higher based on whatever they're going to base their perceived value to the customer. And Gain is always trying to compete with them for those very same things and their value add. So what they had to do to differentiate was to add the value of the sensitivity, right? But they have to compare because they're in the same space. Was to add the value of the sensitivity, right? But they have to compare because they're in the same space. All right. I hope that makes sense. But anyway, another thing to do to assess the direct cost of creating the value is measure the return on investment of the client, right? If I told you that you pay $500, I can't guarantee it. This is clearly an example, right? If I tell you $500 could land you $50,000 in funding in 6 months, for example, that's justifiable return on investment. That's valuable to the client. And I would need to assess the cost of creating that value for them based on how much I know that they're going to get in return, right? So you need to be able to assess what the value is to the actual client, right? Housing is a great example of that. We pay a lot of money for houses because the return for a house is great. You have somewhere to live. You have somewhere that creates a sense of security. You have an appreciating asset. Great. You have somewhere to live. You have somewhere that creates a sense of security. You have an appreciating asset. So you're going to pay a lot of money for that, right? There's a lot of cost that goes into constructing a home, marketing a home. You have an appreciating asset. So you're going to pay a lot of money for that, right? There's a lot of cost that goes into constructing a home, marketing a home, people that got to get paid in between. So it's a very high priced product, right? Because the ROI for the customer is also very high. Right? Those are kind of examples of how you would measure the return on the investment for the client, but also putting it against what you are, what you're putting out as well. Okay. Any questions about that so far? Because we still have 1, 2, 3 more things to talk about before we move on to the implications of funding, and that is where the question about communicating value is going to be answered. Okay. Testing pricing sensitivity. Now, this is not saying to price gouge. I'm not promoting any of that nasty behavior. What I'm saying is, if you find what I've seen, if you find that clients are comfortable with paying $10, for example, for something that is a perceived value, and you consistently get sales at that price, it might not hurt to raise it by $4. Example, right? And you want to test the limits of that, because maybe you've underestimated or undersold yourself, okay? Maybe the perceived value is much higher to the consumer than you thought it is, okay? So testing price sensitivity is going to put you in a position where you can incrementally raise the price. And once you get to a point where you're like tapering off or leveling off, the sales have started to slow down, or they've completely stopped, then you can kind of determine from point A, let's say $10 to $100, where that sweet spot was, where you can consistently generate an income, where, people are not like every single time you tell them what their price is. That is a good point where people understand the value, but then also are willing to pay it at that price. All right. So make sure you're testing the sensitivity of your prices. All right. And then scalability. Will this value require extra effort? That's something that you really got to think about, because it's cool to add the value now, but then in 5 months from now, is it going to be really worth what you're adding to it now, right? So think about the future, how long you're going to be adding it. You're also going to be considering the future implications of what you're adding. So think about those moving parts as well, okay? And then, most importantly, arguably the most important thing, is to make sure that you're maintaining your profit margin, right? You do not want to go add value only for it to destroy your ability to make profit, because that's not the whole point of this, okay? The whole point of adding value is so that you can make more money, so that you can add more value to your customer, and in exchange for more money, right? Because they're getting more. How you do that? We use a priority matrix, okay? It's right here, and it's outlined in this book. It is currently sold out on TikTok, but if you want your copy, you can grab it on Amazon. All right. Measuring the priority. It's called the matrix. It says leverage this worksheet to identify key client desired features and evaluate their implementation and complexity, providing clear direction on feature prioritization for your product or service. You will do this for every product, and I gave you additional sheets in the back. Okay. So product number 1, when you're looking at the different axes, one of them is value, axes, X, Y, whatever they are. I can't think right now. Whatever this axis is, X, maybe. Okay. Whatever this axis is the value. If it's a low value and there's low cost and effort, it's going to go in this box right here. Okay. Because this axis talks about cost and effort versus value. Okay. Low cost, low effort, low value, low cost and effort. low value, high cost and effort. Okay. High value, low cost and effort. High value, high cost and effort. You want to know, you want to be able to put whatever feature you're going to assess value wise for your customer into whatever pocket it falls into. If it costs you more and it's high effort, you need to charge more. Okay. If it's high value and it's low effort, you can work that into your prices, your margins, however you want to work that into. If it's I said high value, I already said that. Okay. If it is low value, low effort, then that's one of those things that you can kind of like extra bonus, like all the things that we talked about earlier. Okay. But if it's low value, high effort, you may not want to add that feature. And this one usually comes up. It's this box right here. This one usually comes up when it's something that people are complaining about that might be moving them away from working with you, but it might cost you too much to implement, right? For example, one of the things that early on in my career people would complain about is the cost of market reports. I don't control those costs, right? Those market reports can cost anywhere from like $5,000 to $7,000, depending on how detailed you want them. It depends on what information you're looking for, right? Like, but I don't generate them. I just analyze them. I just look at them, right? So that considering, it's a low effort for me to be able to go and get the report, or to not even, it would be high effort to do the research, right? But to get the report and whatever, to just get it is low effort, but it's high value to the customer. So they just got to pony up the money and pay for it. But if it was a high value, like they're complaining about the price of it, and if it was a high value, but low value, I'm tripping. High value, but low effort. Oh no, low value, but high effort. It's not something I would do. Period. It's not. Especially if they're not going to care about it, because then it's going to cost me money to produce it for something that's not even going to really make a difference to them anyway. Right? So high value, low effort is ideal. You typically want to be in this box right here. It doesn't cost you a lot to do. There's not a lot of like things that you have to scale. Doesn't require too many tools, materials, effort, time, resources. But it still produces a high value because you can charge more. Okay. Any questions? Grab your copy. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, awesome. So now let's talk about the funding implications of this, right? Why do we have to talk about this from a funding perspective? So we mentioned this at the beginning of the training, or like the session. First and foremost, businesses that are well developed consistently and reliably get funded. Okay? Most organizations will not give you money to figure things out, right? To figure out how you're going to be successful, to figure out how you're going to get customers, to figure out how you're going to produce value. They're not doing that, okay? Because that means that you don't know. And if you don't know why they're giving you money, it doesn't work, right? That's the assumption. So that said, this information, to your point about communicating value, can be used to express your unique value proposition. And it can second as the basis for your elevator pitch, okay? Once you understand the value that you're producing, this is how you're going to communicate to anyone who is looking to give you money. Hey, this is the value that we produce, and this is why customers want to work with us. This is why customers love being with us. This is why customers choose us over the other guy, right? This is your unique selling proposition. This is the basis for your elevator pitch. Okay. Next, this understanding the value that you offer and being able to successfully demonstrate it also shows proof of market demand. All right. Because if customers are saying, hey, we want this, we want this, we want this, we want this value, and you're delivering that value, it's proof that that's something that customers are willing to pay for. All right. And then number 3 is you appear to be less of a risk to someone giving away money, right? If you know how to produce value, you know what your customers want, you know what's going to get them involved, you know what's going to keep them in the door, that is a better position than someone who has no idea of those things, right? So from a funding perspective, if I'm going to give money to someone, I want someone who knows what it is that the customers are demanding and knows how to deliver that value to them versus somebody who has no idea and is going at it blind and they're not addressing their clients' pain points, right? They're not doing all of these things that we're talking about. They're not streamlining their customer experience. They're not providing educational content. They can't, or maybe that's not relevant, but they don't invest in sales support, or they aren't listening to what their customers want. I wouldn't want to give money to somebody like that because that's gonna put you at a disadvantage and it looks riskier, right? So you appear to be less of a risk from a funding perspective when you are able to articulate and qualify and quantify the value that your customers get and that you can produce, okay? And then not only that, but funders prioritize projects that are valuable, okay? The benefit is clear. That's what you need to understand, what they are looking for. The benefit to the consumer, clear as day. There's no confusion. There's no argument about whether the customer wants it or not, if the demand is there, whether or not they're going to buy into it. The benefit absolutely is clear to the person that's giving away that money, right? They prioritize that value. Okay? That pretty much sums up our session today. We went over and talked about creating and delivering value strategically. We talked about how to identify areas where adding value will have the biggest impact. We talked about assessing direct cost of creating value. And then we also spoke about the funding implications, okay? Which is the shortest part, but it's the most important because at the end of the day, all of these longer, more involved parts are what you need to be able to articulate and deliver to your customer in order for someone looking to give you money to believe in what you're doing, right? To understand the value of what you're doing, okay? So we have a couple minutes. If someone wants to come up, I can answer any questions that you might have about how you can deliver value directly. But if not, you can ask any questions that you want, and then we will call it a day. You can test it. Yeah. So I think I know who this is actually. Yeah, I think your profile picture looks familiar. Yes. Test what it is that you're trying to deliver. Okay. Have you ever seen focus groups? That's one way that people determine the value before they start to launch a product. They'll do a focus group, right? And obviously focus groups can be costly. Surveys are another way. You'll see a lot of influencers before they start to develop or launch something, they'll poll their audience. Do you like this versus that, right? Do you want this versus that? Another thing you can do that I think I suggested to you was putting whatever it is that you want out there and getting feedback immediately, right? That's something that will give you insight into whether the demand is there and what people are finding valuable. That's definitely one way that you can do that before launch, okay? And you can talk to people who are in your target market. Like the people that you should know will be buying your product based on psychographics, demographics, all the other like features that you're looking to have in your target market. You can speak to someone that fits within. Sorry, TikTokers did a thing. You can speak to people that fit within that framework for who you want to speak to and ask them. That's one of the things that we talked about a little bit earlier when I said ask, right? Ask them, talk to them about it, right? Just ask, what is the value? Like, this is what I plan on producing. This is what I plan on doing. What is the value to you? What would be the benefit to you? Okay. And then that's where I kind of said to determine and safeguard against people's pockets versus your actual value, right? Ask questions about what the benefit would be to them. And then that's how you can determine what the value will be. Okay. Yeah. So that's to answer that question. Any other questions? Any other questions? Does anyone want to come on? Okay. I'm going to take that as my sign to exit stage left. It has been good. This will be available on YouTube later today, whenever TikTok allows me to download it. Just a couple housekeeping things. We are meeting on November 21st where we're doing our predictions for 2025, where funding is going to be going. So if you haven't signed up for that already, that registration is still open. The grant list for this month is still free. So if you are interested, you can get up to 192 opportunities that are available for the month of November. And then also, I did add, per you guys' request, a couple more days to the one-on-one sessions. So if you're interested in that, those days have been added. And then the books are still sold out on TikTok. Okay. So if you are interested in any of the books that are available, so that's like the funding formula, and then that's also the Win With Us and Watch Us Win. Those are available on Amazon. Okay. So if no other questions, no comments, concerns, we are out of here for today, and we'll come back tomorrow and I'll send out an email about the time. So check your emails. Have a good one.